Now let's relook at our clean missing data strategy. Now let's go back and visualize this particular data. And we know that we had 177 missing values in age, and we adopted a simple approach wherein we dragged and dropped a clean missing data component, and we used a cleaning mode as replace with mean. Now you could also try with mode, you could also try with median to see if there is any positive influence in that particular model. But in each of those instances that we are trying to replace data, we are trying to replace the data of missing values with the same age, which means that both adult and child are being replaced with single average value, which does not seem consistent with our analysis. Now let's look at the data in Excel, and you could see that each passenger has got a name which reflects that particular title of that particular passenger, and which seems fairly consistent with the age that has been provided in that particular data point. Now for example, let's filter by the name, and let's say name contains master. Now when we do name contains master, it filters out all the data points whose passenger names had a title called masters, and you would see the age distribution, correct? And let's remove the blanks from that particular data point, and let's relook at that particular data point, and you can see the value ranges between anywhere between 0 and 12. Now what does that tell you from that particular data point? It reflects that anybody beyond the age of 12 has been marked as adult. Now we could also check that, we could check that particular assumption as well. Let's see if there is any passenger whose age is 12 or roughly 13. Yep, and there you have a particular passenger, and so it does have master, so I think it should be 13. And you can see here both the passengers who were marked 13 were female passengers. So let's go back and let's kind of change it to 14 and see. So our assumption is consistent with that particular data point. So any passenger who is a child has been marked as master whose age is between 0 and 12. So anybody or any passenger whose age is greater than 12, which is 13, that particular passenger has been marked as an adult. As you can see here rightfully, in the case of Mr. Charles Edward Goodwin, has been marked as an adult and not as a child, because you can see that from the title that has been put in that particular passenger's name. A couple of more interesting observations that I would like to draw your attention to. So we were able to successfully identify a male child versus a female, or rather, we were able to identify a male child versus a male adult. So we had a title embedded in the name through which we could articulate whether that particular male passenger was a child or an adult. Can we do that in the context of a female passenger? So if you were to look at the title of all the female passengers, okay, let's remove the filter here. I'm going to say clear filter. I'm going to refilter it, and I'm going to filter it based on gender. And I'm going to have a look at the names of that particular passengers. Now, if you were to look at gender is female, sorry that I didn't do it earlier, could see, and let's for the sake of assumption, let's remove all those passengers who had a blank value, age. Okay, and let's deal with a smaller data set. And what are the different types of titles that you can see in the context of female passengers? Now let's skim through the data set and let's find out. So you have a Mrs. title, and then you have Miss title, and probably that's it. Probably you have something called Mademoiselle or a few other titles. Now, how do we really distinguish between a female adult from a female child? Now, unfortunately, in the context of the Titanic dataset, you cannot do that. And that kind of speaks volume about the society in general that was there in the early 1900s. Oh, now, Mrs. as a title is used for females who are married. So, if somebody in the case of John Bradley is married, then you would use a Mrs. title. Miss is a common title which is which kind of denotes both child and an adult. So unless there is an age here, it's very difficult for us to go and identify that particular passenger as a child or adult. Now, why am I making such a broad statement here? Now let's look at all those passengers and let's remove all those passengers who have a recorded age. Right? And let's just focus on the blanks. Now, in this case, some of those passengers, for example, let's remove those passengers whose contains Mrs. Correct, and does not, I'm going to say, does not contain Mrs. Because we know for sure that if you had a title called Mrs., you're married. And now you can see a set of titles appearing in this particular passenger list, and predominantly you will see that most of the female passengers had a title of Miss. Now, having no other information, it's very difficult for us to go and derive whether this particular passenger was a child or an adult. So we need to make a broad assumption here. We need to probably make a broader assumption to say, hey, I'm going to assume that these passengers who are female are going to be tagged as child or tagged as an adult. So in totality, there are 36 female passengers who we cannot clearly articulate whether those passengers are children or adult. Now, the reason we are not able to derive at that particular information is because we need more information about that particular passenger so as to make an assumption. However, we can always go with an hypothetical assumption that all those passengers who do not have an age, who are female, can be marked as both child or adult. And so there are different strategies that you could deploy during your predictive modeling exercise. Whatever strategy that you deploy or adopt, it's important for you to jot down those assumptions and make a note of those assumptions so that you can present it during your findings in terms of, hey, these are the assumptions that I made in the absence of data for me to build a predictive model.